Good morning, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome back to Law and Crime. This is where we cover some of the most interesting live trials in the country today. And today we are covering our continued coverage of one of the biggest cases in the country right now, the Tex McIver case out of Atlanta, a man who is charged with the murder of his wife. Now, while the prosecution is saying that he intentionally shot his wife, the defense is saying it was a complete accident. As we enter into day 9 of live testimony, I have a feed into the courtroom. I'm looking at it right now. We're waiting for the audio to come in. We're going to live stream that case as soon as we do, as soon as it begins. You're not going to want to miss anything because yesterday we heard the interrogation tape from Tex McIver from police. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'll talk more about the Tex McIver case, but I want to talk about another case that you can go on lawandcrime.com today to follow. It's a great case. It's the Leon Jacob case, a man from Texas who's on trial for allegedly, with his new girlfriend, hiring a hitman to take out his ex-girlfriend and his new girlfriend's ex-husband. Process that one for a second. Well, we have a short preview about this case for anybody who hasn't heard about it, so let's play that for you right now.
Leon Jacob faces life in prison for the alleged murder-for-hire plot to kill 2 people in Houston, Texas. Jacob and Dr. Valerie McDaniel were arrested after allegedly negotiating to pay $20K in 2 Cartier watches for a hitman to kill McDaniel's ex-husband and kidnap Jacob's ex-girlfriend so he could kill her himself. Only the hitman wasn't a hitman. He was an undercover police officer. During the prosecution's opening statement, Cameron Callaghan painted Jacob as a jilted lover out for revenge.
Leon Jacob does not stop until he gets what he wants.
The prosecution alleges Jacob enlisted this man, Moataz Aziz, to hire a hitman to kill this woman, his ex-girlfriend, Megan Veritas. Aziz, who the defendant knew as Zach, accepted thousands of dollars in cash to take care of Veritas. After several weeks of being strung along by Zach with no results, Jacob spoke to this man, Michael Kubash, a city council member and owner of a bail bonds company. According to Kubash, an aggravated Jacob showed up at his office making accusations that he knew a hitman.
All he was so focused on was getting Zach's number. He had paid him a lot of money, and he wanted this witness, which I learned to be Megan Veritas, to not testify against him on these cases because it would also hurt his medical license.
Kubash contacted police, and investigators set up an undercover officer to act as a hitman. The undercover police officer testified for over 5 hours, with prosecutors playing secretly recorded audio of Jacob and McDaniels allegedly agreeing to pay $10K per murder.
So at least you start, I'll need the $2,500 payment.
Just get it done, you'll get the payment.
Investigators had Jacob and McDaniel's former lovers pose for pictures to fake their respective murders and kidnapping. McDaniel's ex-husband, Marion Mac McDaniel, posed as if he had been shot and killed in his car. Megan Veritas took the stand and broke down while viewing the staged photos.
Do you know why they wanted to take photos of you? Because somebody had been paid to kill me and they needed that as backup.
Veritas details her breakup with the defendant, as well as the domestic violence and stalking she allegedly endured.
Didn't want to be near him, so I hid in a closet.
You did what?
Hid in a closet.
Why did you hide in a closet?
Because I was afraid of Leon.
But the defense maintains Jacob's innocence, saying Jacob loved Megan and didn't intend to do her any harm.
The truth is, Leon loved Megan. He didn't want her hurt. He wanted a life with Megan. The reality is, if it wasn't for Officer Duran forcing this agenda, forcing his motive, forcing his own narration of the events transpiring, we wouldn't be here today. If it was not for Officer Duran trying to make this into a television story and force his own narrative, Leon would not be forced here today to tell his story.
McDaniels leaped to her death from her condo balcony after being arrested for her alleged role in the murder-for-hire plot. I'm Rachel Stockman for Law and Crime.
I guess love is complicated, maybe that's the way to say it. Well, we saw yesterday Leon Jacob actually take the stand. That's right, the defendant took the stand, and things got a little heated when he did. Take a look.
So when you tell the members of this jury that you're heartsick over Megan, that's not really true, is it? Because it sure didn't take you long to move on, did it?
Matters of the heart and how you feel are subject to the way you feel at a moment. I mean, you're asking me to get up here and say that I'm some womanizer. That's fine. You can characterize me as that. It doesn't make me guilty of solicitation of capital murder. I have no problem sitting here and saying that I slept with Valerie 7 days after Megan and I broke up. But I'm not on trial for being a womanizer. I'm on trial for solicitation of capital murder. So you can assassinate my character all you want up here. It doesn't make me guilty of what you've charged me with.
Sometimes you just can't make this stuff up, can you? Well, if you want to go to lawandcrime.com, you can follow the Lee and Jacob case all day. It's going to be on there, so you don't want to miss it. But our focus right now on the network is coming back to the Claude Tex McIver case. We expect a live feed any moment, but I should let our viewers know that a juror is late again. This is the second time that a juror has been late. This juror just keeps being late, and it appears that the other jurors are not too happy. Let's just really quick, before we go to our first commercial break, let's bring in criminal defense attorney Yosha Gunasekera. Yosha, it's great to see you.
It's great to be here.
You're not late to set. The juror is late. How does this happen that a juror can be late to court?
There's a variety of reasons. I've had cases with late jurors. Sometimes it's public transportation. Sometimes it's babysitting issues. It just could be a variety of reasons. But generally, once the judge tells you that you have to be here on time, that usually happens after someone is late one time, you pay attention and you get there on time. So this is not looking good for Juror 61.
Well, when the juror finally does come, what do you expect will happen today in court?
I expect the judge will give him or her a very stern reprimand. It really delays the whole trial and process, and this is one of the reasons the trial is long. The days are longer. Sometimes they're going past 5 p.m.
She's apparently been late every day of this trial. No excuse.
And that's not going to make any friends among the other jurors. And I actually think that that's important because there's a chemistry that jurors have when they're in that deliberation room.
They're all listening to the same things together, and then they're eventually going to have to deliberate together. But Yosha, stand by. We're going to take a quick break because there is so much to talk about in this case. We have so much to talk about in terms of the prosecution's case and what the defense's case will ultimately show. But we're going to begin our conversation when we come back from this break about the interrogation tape. That's right, Tex McIver was interviewed by police, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what he said to police. Again, we'll be back in a minute. You don't want to miss anything. Stay tuned. Back to Law and Crime, everybody. We are keeping a careful eye right now in the courtroom for Claude Tex McIver out of Atlanta. As soon as we have a live feed, we're going to make sure to go to it. But what I want to play for you right now is the interrogation tape of Claude Tex McIver. Again, this is when he was interviewed by the police, and I don't want you to miss anything. This was very important. Listen carefully to what was said.
Driving, right? Okay. I was in the backseat. In the backseat? Okay. And what's the next thing that you can, I know you said you kind of fell asleep there. What's the next thing that you can remember from there?
Despite the fact I was tired, I don't sleep well in cars.
Right.
But we went through an area I felt it was particularly dangerous at night. That's one that has a particularly high population of homeless people.
Okay.
At least in the daytime. But at night, there's a lot of people there.
Okay.
And I quickly said, this is a big mistake, and we're in a place that we don't belong.
Right.
And I said, you know, I'd like to, if you don't mind, please hand me my gun.
Right.
So Diane reaches in, pulls it out, hands it back to me, and by then we may have been on team off. Anyway, I'm relatively satisfied that we're out of that kind of area.
Right.
And I guess I just laid back again and went to sleep.
Okay.
But she came to a stop, and I was handling the gun. And I realized it was in my lap,
Right.
and it went off.
Okay.
Now the jurors are really getting an opportunity to see and hear from the defendant. So let's break it down about what we think they might have taken from that. Again, I'm here with Yosha Gunasekera. Yosha, what do you think about that interrogation tape?
So first of all, it's very interesting because he is flanked by 2 attorneys. Oftentimes, when you see police speaking to a criminal defendant, they're just there on their own. So what you can expect is that this narrative is carefully tailored. It's something that they have practiced with him to make sure that he's maybe maybe not saying anything that he shouldn't say. So that's the first thing to take away from that, and I think that's significant.
That interview was made 3 days after Diane McIver was shot, and that is now the narrative that the defense has gone with, that this was that they were driving, they were going to a bad part of town, Diane handed him the gun went off. What the interesting part about it is when the shooting first happened, he was at the hospital, what the prosecution is really seizing upon is McIver was changing story. So isn't it interesting that the videotaped interview happened several days after when he had his story locked?
It's not surprising because they want to make sure that that's the story they're going to go with. That's the narrative, because you're totally right that what he says in that investigation room just days after the incident, it's what's going to control everything that happens next. If this case were to go to trial, and now we know it is on trial, that is a narrative that is going to control, and that's what they have to stick to. They really can't change from that, but the prosecution is going to capitalize on the discrepancies there. He's not mentioning a sleep disorder. He's not mentioning Black Lives Matter. Right. He's not mentioning the bump on the road. So that's where the prosecutors really have an in.
Let's break that down. So the bump in the road, we know from Danny Giocardo, there really was no bump. The gunshot went off when the car was stopped. The sleep disorder, couldn't you argue, though, he didn't know he had a sleep disorder? But then again, Danny Giocardo did say, when she was testifying, I knew him to be a man that did have sleeping issues, and he would wake up in a startle. So couldn't the defense try to explain some of that away, or is that not looking so good?
They could definitely explain some of it away. He's in this interrogation room talking about what happened. He's not necessarily going to go into his medical history, even though it's actually really relevant here. So that's an omission that I think can later be explained away by the defense. I don't think it's fatal at all in this case.
So you also hear about the fact later on about the gun, and when the defense attorneys first came forward, they talked about in their opening statement about the gun having 2 action modes, single action, double action, and that would help determine whether the gun needed about 12 or 15 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, which is a deliberate action, or it was more of a hair trigger. So it depended upon what mode it was in. Yesterday we heard there was a point made in the interrogation about the Revolvers Hammer and whether or not it was cocked or not. Again, isn't that the whole case? What was the situation with the gun? Not so much the motive. I know that the prosecution has started with motive. But what do you think about the actual gun? Isn't that where everything falls into place?
The gun is going to be very significant, but the prosecutor is going to put on evidence and information that it took a lot of pressure, that he intentionally pulled the trigger. But then once you see the defense's case, they're going to put on a ballistics expert, that says that it was a hair trigger. So really, while it is one of the most important pieces, you're going to hear that it was a hair trigger and that it wasn't a hair trigger. So it almost cancels itself out. Ultimately, the jurors have to decide who they believe more.
So I think our viewers would appreciate not even hearing from us about the gun, but let's learn a little bit more about it from a man who testified yesterday, Detective Brett Zimbrick. This is a man who testified about that weapon. Let's listen in.
I'm just looking for one particular area, Judge. Okay. Within my 4 areas, Judge, I have a question about the gun. Can you tell the jurors, when you had your preliminary discussions with Steve Maples, can you tell the jurors what he said about the hammer of the gun?
He indicated that the hammer was not in what he called the full cock position, which...
You talking about what he said?
The full cock position. Was not in the full cock position.
Okay, was not in a full cock position. Can you tell the jurors, based on your training and your experience, what is full cock position?
It is a position on a revolver.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Hey, that's not exactly what the words were. So again, I am, and I'm going to refer you, Judge, to page 4.
I'm getting there.
So
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a live feed in the Tex McIver courtroom. As soon as it starts, we're going to make sure to go to it. You don't want to miss anything. This has been a really exciting trial. The judge is speaking now to the jury. Let's listen in.
I don't want to have a back and forth. I'm just letting you know, everyone else is here. Everyone's getting frustrated, so we need you to be on time. All right, Mr. Rucker, if you will call your next witness, please.
Yes. Your Honor, the state will call Mr. Jay Grover.
You heard the judge talking to the juror about you can't be late to court. Yosha, what do you expect today in terms of testimony?
It's going to be interesting. I think they're going to continue to have, I believe the prosecution closed, so the defense is really going to build their case today. They're going to try to rebut all of the evidence that has come in so far. They're going to try to paint a picture of a good marriage between Danny, Joe, and Tex, and really build their case that this was
You mean
just...
a good marriage between Diane and Tex?
Oh.
Sorry, there's a lot of characters here.
There is. And I felt like there's been some chemistry between Danny, Joe, and Tex, so it was like this subliminal
I think there was more
Freudian.
chemistry between one of the doctors and Clint Rucker, the prosecutor, but that's a whole other story. Let's listen in live to this next witness who's about to take the stand.
Mike, you can, and for the court's purposes, can you say your name and spell it?
Yes, Jay Grover, Jaygrover.
And good morning, Mr. Grover.
Good morning.
And good morning, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Counsel, you beat me to it. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the jurors by restating your name and just tell them, sir, where are you currently employed?
Good morning. My name is Jay Grover, and I'm a Vice President of Special Projects at the Corey Companies. U.S. Enterprises, probably better known as the Corey Companies.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how long have you had that current position?
Since February of 2007.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how long have you been employed at U.S. Enterprises in total?
I initially started working for Mr. Corey when I was 15 years old. I pumped gas in one of his gas stations during high school. And later during college, I worked on one of his billboard crews. So I've been around. The Mr. Corey, Diane McIver, and the family for over 40 years.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, over the course of those 40 years, you got a chance to know Diane McIver?
Yes, quite well.
And could you characterize for the jurors, how would you describe your relationship with Diane McIver?
It was fabulous. Diane was a true friend. I mean, she was my boss. I didn't report directly to her. I've always reported directly to Mr. Corey, but I had a close personal and business relationship with Diane. Very early on, when I was married the first time, I used to attend parties at her house when she lived in Conyers and during her first marriage. And just over the years, I've attended all the Christmas functions and all for the company, and been around all my life.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that you love Diane?
Absolutely.
Now, can you tell the jurors, how would you describe Diane as a business woman?
She was very hard-nosed. She was very driven, very ambitious. She was, as a business person, Diane was tough as nails. There was if she put her mind to on a certain project or something, she went after it, and she was relentless in her pursuit of it.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, do you have any personal experience with what we have been calling Diane's sharp tongue? If you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Diane had a very acerbic wit about her. I mean, she was sharp tongued, I guess that's a good way to describe her as having a sharp tongue. She was to those around her that were not to just general people that she met, but to those who were.
That's Jay Grover, a man who worked with Diane McIver, the victim in this case, recounting his relationship with her and what she was like as a person and a person in business. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go straight back into the courtroom. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. Let's go live into the Claude Tex McIver courtroom where Jay Grover, a man that worked with Diane McIver, the victim, is back on the stand. Let's listen.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, it was just like she was in business. She was relentless. It would go on and on. There were times when she'd start picking at somebody, and again, this is people that she knew, but she would just get on something, and she would just go on, and I'd have to bite my tongue sometimes because it'd be very easy to kind of lash out, but then it would just keep on going from there. So I'd try to bite my tongue to. It wasn't malicious to the point that it was necessarily mean-spirited, but it got to be quite annoying and aggravating.
Okay. Now, had you ever seen Diane McIver be that way with her husband, the way in which you have just described to the jurors?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Now, did you know Diane McIver to make loans to her friends? Did you know about that?
No, sir.
Okay. And did you know, has she ever made you a loan?
Never.
Never. And did you know anything about any loans between Diane McIver and her husband?
Well, can we clarify the foundation for that? Because it sounds like the foundation would probably be hearsay.
Specifically, I'll rephrase it. Specifically, do you know anything about a $350,000 loan to the defendant?
That leaves open the same issue. If Mr. McIver ever talked to him about it, you're probably okay. Otherwise, I have no reason
in that matter.
Okay.
Have you ever had any conversations with Mr. McIver about a $350,000 loan that his wife would give him?
No, sir.
Okay. And so, you know, was she open about her personal finances with you?
Diane, no, sir, never. Diane was a very private person. She would never discuss anything like that.
Okay. How about discussing with you any of the intimate personal details between herself and her husband? She the kind of person who would discuss that with you?
Their
marriage?
No, sir. Okay. Never.
And that's because she was a private person?
Yes.
Let's not lead anymore.
Was she a private person?
Well, you can't object to one form, and then when he makes it non-leading, say, wait, now you're doing what I just objected to, fixing it. I don't like that.
Okay. Is it okay if he answers that question, Judge? Was she a private person?
I think why we got the second objection, because he did answer the first one.
Okay.
I don't know that everyone heard it, because there was an objection, a well-placed objection. But then you were addressing the concern raised in the objection in switching two words around in the question.
Okay.
Do I need to answer?
Why don't you answer it again?
Diane was a very private person.
Now, can you tell the jury, did you make it to see Mr. Corey that morning, Monday the 26th?
I did. I left my fiance's house, and I started to his house, approximately 10 minutes away in Conyers, to his estate. But before I arrived there, he actually called me.
Okay. So don't tell us what he told you, but let me just ask you this. Ultimately, did you all end up in the same car together, or vehicle?
Yes, I also live on Mr. Corey's estate, and he picked me up from my house just a few minutes later, and he drove, and I was in the passenger seat, and we started towards the office from Conyers to our office at Corey Center, which is right downtown behind the state capitol on MLK.
Where did we see the smokestack?
The tower.
The tower, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yes,
the
sir.
tower, actually.
It was a Georgia Power steam plant, and it was in the term smokestack. It never actually had smoke coming out of it, but it was that building and that tower. They produced the steam that heated the buildings in the downtown area.
Back in the day when steam heating.
Yeah, yes. It was actually only used for like 18 months or 24 months, not for a long period of time before. And then Mr. Corey bought the building in the early 1990s.
And can you tell the jury, did you actually arrive at the office, Mr. Corey?
I did.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, during those early morning hours there, Monday the 26th of September, did you have any other phone conversations with the defendant?
At any point or during the ride-in?
During the ride-in.
During the ride-in, no, sir.
Okay. Can you tell the jury, after you spoke to the defendant, can you tell the jury, did you know whether or not anyone else was involved with Diane's death?
Yes, I learned that Danny was driving the vehicle.
Okay. And did you learn that from your conversation with the defendant around 7 o'clock that morning?
No, sir.
That's Jay Grover, a man that worked with the victim, Diane McIver, in this case, recounting the time that he heard that she died. Not an easy part of testimony for him. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to go back into the Atlanta courtroom for the Tex McIver case. Jay Grover, a man that worked with the victim, Diane McIver, is on the stand. Let's listen in.
The car hitting a bump.
I would object, Your Honor. I need to ask this question, what Mr. McIver said. And Mr. Grover said he heard the words car and accident, but don't remember what else was said.
It's a fair point. If you're referring to that
phone conversation
call.
Okay, I understand. Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, when did you have that conversation with Danny Joe?
On the ride-in from Conyers to our office downtown at Corey Center, which takes about 25 minutes. At some point on the ride-in, I'm pretty certain I text her, and she called me just as we were turning into the parking lot at the building at our office.
Okay. And so can you tell the jurors, after having the conversation with Danny Joe, did you and Mr. Corey actually go into the office there?
Yes, sir. If I can back up a little bit in time, on on the way in, then I made a telephone call to our office and actually spoke to Terry Brown, and I told Terry that Mr. Corey and I were on our way in, and would he please get Angie Brooks, Ken Rickert, and Richard Harrell. And let me back up. Angie Brooks is our executive vice president of our company. Ken Rickert is our general counsel, and Richard Harrell was at that time our chief financial officer, essentially the executive team. And I asked Terry to get them, and Mr. Corey and I would be in shortly, and for them to meet us in Mr. Corey's office as soon as we arrived.
Okay. And so, once you arrived, can you tell the jurors what happened once you went inside?
Yeah. Once again, if I can back up, just so as we arrived and I spoke to Danny, returned my phone call. I put her on the speakerphone, and Mr. Corey and I sat in the parking lot of our office, and Danny told us what happened.
Okay.
Briefly told us what happened. I mean,
about how long do you think that phone conversation lasted between yourself and Danny Joe? You had on speakerphone.
I would say something less than 10 minutes. I don't know exactly. I think we were in just kind of disbelief, and I really didn't ask her any questions or anything, so I'd say something less than 10 minutes.
Okay. And is that when you made it inside the office building there?
Yes, sir. We parked and we went in, and right as we went in the front door, the reception area, some of our employees had gathered in the front lobby area right there, and right as we went in, then just by the positioning of the offices, then Ms. Brooks started out of her office, and Mr. Harrell came out, and like I said, there was a few of our other employees that were there, and I think, there may have been just some words said, and Mr. Corey started down what we call the executive hallway, which was the hallway in our, that kind of bisects our office building. There's two of them, but on one side where his and Diane's office were, the only two offices on that particular hallway, that he started down the hallway, followed by Mr. Harrell, Miss Brooks, and I said, where's Ken at? And I started kind of around to the other hallway to get Mr. Rickert, and he met me about the same time, so he just kind of walked in front of me, and we started down the hallway. It's a relatively short hallway, and they were a little bit ahead, and my phone rang.
Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here at Law and Crime covering the Claude Tex McIver case. We're going to go back live into the courtroom. Jay Grover, a man that worked with the victim, is back on the stand.
I just want you to remember that she loves you. And I didn't know what to say. I was just trying to process that, and I said, look, we're just walking into Mr. Corey's office for a meeting. Here, let me give my phone to him. And I handed my phone to Mr. Corey, and I just sat down. The others were in Mr. Corey's office, and I just sat down, and there was just a brief conversation with Mr. Corey, and I don't even know what they said or anything, and he handed me my phone back, and I just put it away.
Now, can you tell the jurors, did you and Mr. Corey, did you all go over to the condominium located here in Atlanta on that Monday, September 26th?
No, we did not.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, on Tuesday, September 27th, can you tell the jurors what happened that morning?
I knew that Janie Calhoun was back in town. I knew that Janie had arrived back from Dallas, and I called Janie to check on her, to see how she was doing, and we engaged in a conversation. I called Janie that morning.
Okay. And after having a conversation with Janie Calhoun, did you actually travel to her condominium there?
Yes, yes, we did.
Okay.
Myself and Mr. Corey, we left the office and we went to the villas at Buckhead Heights to Janie's condo.
Okay. And Janie's condo is how far from Diana McIver's condo?
Well, it's on the same floor. One bank of elevators up to that floor, the 15th floor, and there's only 4 condos on each floor of that building. Diane had 2 of them on one side of the building. Janie had hers was on the opposite side of the building, same floor, and then another couple had the other condo. So physically, they're 50, 75 feet apart from door to door, maybe.
And do you know what time was it when you and Mr. Corey arrived at Janie's condo?
I'm going to guess it was around mid-morning. I believe around 10-ish, something like that. 10, maybe a little later.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors when you arrived at Janie Calhoun's condominium mid-morning, who was there?
Actually, physically within her condo?
Correct.
Danny Carter, Danny Joe, and Janie.
Okay.
And Mr. Corey and myself. Then Mr. Corey and myself were there.
Now, is this the first time that you have had a chance to actually see Danny Joe Carter since you learned of Diane's death?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors what happened when you and Mr. Corey arrived at the condo of Janie Calhoun?
When we first arrived at the building, we went upstairs, and as we stepped off of the elevator, then Tex was in the lobby area between the 2 condos on his cell phone, and that was the first time that we had also seen him, and he was on the phone, and we just kind of hi, and we walked on and went directly into Janie's condo.
Okay. This is State's Exhibit number 73. You recognize State's Exhibit 73, this picture, the scene depicted in it?
I do.
What is it?
This is the area that I was speaking of, where you come up the elevator onto the 15th floor, and it's the lobby of that floor between the condos.
Okay. And when you step off these elevators, first of all, if you touch that screen, it'll make a mark. Okay. Where are the elevators?
This is the elevator. There's two of them, one there, and there's the other door there you can't see. So
okay. And which way would you go to get to Diane McIver's condo?
When you came off the elevators, you would go to the right and to Diane's condo there, okay. And you'd go to the left and then back to the left to go into Janie's condo.
Okay. And where did you see the defendant standing when you and Mr. Corey got off the elevator?
He was standing right in this area, right here.
Okay. And did you see anyone else standing there, or was he alone?
He was alone.
What was he doing?
On his cell phone.
He was on his cell phone?
Yes, sir.
And was there any conversation had between you and the defendant at that time?
Nothing more than hey, or it may have. That's all of it. You know, there was no conversation.
Okay. So where did you and Mr. Corey go after you saw the defendant there?
We went to Janie's condo.
Okay. And when you arrived and got inside, can you tell the jurors what happened?
Janie and Danny were there, and we hugged, and I think we probably shed a tear or two, and we asked we asked Danny to sit down and tell us what happened.
Let me show you a photograph. It's already been admitted into evidence. Mr. Grover, State's Exhibit number 70. Recognize State's Exhibit number 70?
I do.
How do you recognize what's depicted in State's Exhibit number 70?
This is Janie's living room of her condominium. Been there many times.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, when you asked Danny Joe to sit down and tell us what happened, were you in this room?
Yes.
And could you point out for the jury where everyone was positioned within the room by using this photo?
Danny was sitting right here on the couch. Mr. Corey was sitting right here on the couch. I was sitting in this side chair here, and Janie was sitting in this side chair right there.
Okay. And don't tell us what Danny Joe may have said to you, but did she tell you some details about what actually happened on the inside of the SUV?
Your Honor, I object. It's still hearsay, I think. What's the content of the conversation generally about what happened inside this?
Okay. I'll allow the question.
At that time, did Danny Joe Carter give you details about what happened on the inside of the SUV?
Yes, sir, she did.
How about any events that would have occurred at the hospital after the shooting? You recall if she told you any details at that time?
At that time, no, sir. I do not recall her saying anything at that time.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jury, after having the conversation or hearing what Danny Joe had to say, what happened next?
Well, at some point during, if I can back up just a minute, at some point during this, then Austin Swall, who was Diane's godson, came and knocked at the door, and he wanted to come in and see us. I mean, this kid's grown up with us, and Janie told him, you know, not now, Austin, but we'll come and get you in a few minutes, and And then when we finished the conversation, then there was another knock on the door, and it was Tex.
Okay. Now, do you know from where Austin was coming from when he knocked on the door? Do you know where he was? Do you know?
I
Don't
do
guess.
not.
You either know
No,
or you don't.
no, sir, I do not.
Okay.
I do not know.
Okay. And when Tex knocked at the door, can you tell the jurors what happened?
Janie went to the door and opened it and said, "Hey, Tex, and come on in."
Okay. And did he come in?
He did.
Did you get a chance to see him?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe for the jury what was his demeanor when you saw him?
Just seemed like Tex. Nothing. There was nothing remarkable that I recall.
Okay. So when he came inside, tell the jurors what happened.
Well, we sat back down. Danny and Mr. Corey sat in the same seats. Again, Mr. Corey sat right here. Danny sat here. I sat back down in my seat. Janie moved over to one of these, the side chair over here, and Tex sat down in this chair where Janie had previously was previously seated.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, did the defendant say anything at that time?
He did.
And can you tell the jurors, what did he say?
When he sat down, in the chair. We all sat down. The first thing that he did, he turned and looked over at me and said, "Jay, can you believe they want to charge me with reckless conduct for this thing?" And I was taken aback by that. I kind of stuttered and stammered, and I said, Tex, I think there's some elements of a crime here. I was a former police officer, and so I think there's elements of a crime here. I was actually shocked that would be the first thing out of his mouth.
Now, can you tell the jurors, during the time that the defendant was there in the condominium that belonged to Janie Calhoun, in the presence of Mr. Corey, did you ever hear Mr. McIver give any details regarding what occurred on the night of Diane McIver's death?
None.
None?
None.
Can you tell the jurors, first of all, about how long did the defendant stay there inside of the condominium at Janie's house?
10, 15 minutes. He got a phone call.
Okay. And Did you actually hear his phone ring?
I did.
And was he still sitting in the chair, like right alongside you?
Yes, sitting in the other side chair adjacent to where I was sitting.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors when he got the phone call, did he say anything to you?
He did.
Can you tell the jurors what did he say to you?
As he pulled his phone out, he looked down at it. He said, and looking to me, he said, this is my PR guy, Bill Crane. Yeah, Jay, don't you know Bill? And I said, yeah. And he said, I got to get this. And he answered the phone and got up and walked out talking on the phone.
How did the defendant refer to Bill Crane?
Objection, Your Honor. We're just repeating the answer he just gave.
I understand. How do you know Bill Crane?
I first met Bill 25 years ago through his childhood friend later became one of my best friends, and when I first met him, we reconnected 5-6 years ago when our friend got sick and later passed away, and so Bill and I kind of reconnected.
Okay.
That way.
Okay. Who is Bill Crane? What does he do?
Bill Crane's he's a public relations and marketing consultant here in the Atlanta area, and he's also a pretty prominent talking head, a political analyst on Channel 2 and WSB Radio. I actually heard him on the radio this morning on the way in.
Well, if anybody had any doubt about who Jay Grover was, it's very important to know that Jay Grover is now providing some crucial information about what Tex said. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. Welcome back, everybody. Let's go back into the Atlanta courtroom for Claude Tex McIver, a man, Jay Grover, a person who worked with the victim and knew Tex, the defendant, is on the stand. Let's listen in.
Sure, greeted people, and basically I went and sat down in a chair, kind of in the corner of the living room. A little hard to describe, but or the family room, not the room that we would typically be in when we would go over there in the evenings, but they were in the living area of the condo, and I sat down in a chair, in a side chair there.
Okay. I want to show you a series of photos. Your Honor, for the purposes of the record, they are marked as State's Exhibits number 402 through 410, sequentially without giving any numbers. Okay?
You had a chance to see those, Mr. Clark-Paul?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is there any objection? Okay. I was just tendering to evidence judge this time.
402 through 410 are admitted.
And just for the record, just flip through each one of these photos, Mr. Grover, and then just tell the judge whether or not you can say that they fairly and accurately reflect the inside of Diana McIver's conduct.
They do.
Okay. Did you hear that?
did hear me.
Okay, we're good? Okay. I want to show you State's Exhibit number 410. And can you explain to the jurors what we see in State's Exhibit 410?
This is from the dining room of the condo, looking back into what I would describe as the living room.
Okay. And in this photograph, are we able to see where you were sitting?
Yes.
Where is it?
I sit in that chair right there.
Okay. Can you make that dot a little bit bigger for the jurors in the back? Okay.
That's a big dot.
Yeah.
Good job.
This is State's Exhibit 408. Can you explain to the jurors what we see in State's Exhibit 408?
So this photo would be kind of with your back to the master bedroom, but somewhat of the view that you would see if you were sitting from the chair where I was sitting. Chairs on each side, like an entertainment center with the TV in it in between those. So this is kind of looking back into the dining room, the living room, and this being the dining room table and there.
Okay. And is that the place where you would share meals with Mr. Corey, Diane McIver, and the defendant?
And yes, and quite often Austin too.
And Austin too.
And Jamie.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, from this photograph, if I wanted to get into the kitchen, which way would I go?
This is actually an archway, right? I don't know if I messed up where you can't see it now, but that's an archway that leads directly into a galley-style kitchen.
Okay. And this is State's Exhibit 407. Slide that out just a little bit. That's the galley-style kitchen?
Yes, sir.
Now, does Diane McIver's condominium have balconies that overlook really the Buckhead area?
Yes, because she actually has two balconies up.
Let's break this down right now. Again, we're watching the testimony of Jay Grover. Okay, so we're watching the testimony of Jay Grover, everybody. And the reason I want to talk to you about this, I want to bring in criminal defense attorney Yosha Gunasekera. Yosha, we're watching this testimony, and I want to understand a little bit the significance of it. This is the importance of it. Now, he was talking about the statements that Tex McIver made to him. Now, those statements are very important. Can you shed a little bit light about how the jury is supposed to process this?
Well, it's very interesting. It's how Tex is acting after the incident itself. And he's saying some really interesting things to Jay. Jay was very taken aback, he said, when the first thing that Tex is saying is talking about himself, talking about the fact that he may be charged with something and that he has a PR guy. So it's very bizarre behavior that you would see from someone who just had a loved one die.
Right, and the thing is, can you believe that I'm going to be charged with a what was it? He says, can you believe they want to charge me with reckless conduct for this thing? Now, Jay Grover is a former police officer, and he says, this looks like a crime to me. So, again, not a good day for the defense so far, Yosha.
Yes, it's not looking good. And if I was Tex and I heard a friend say, well, it actually doesn't look good for you, and then he continues to talk about the case, and he continues to say things that he should know just don't sound good. You're concerned about a PR guy when your wife just died? It's really strange testimony that we're hearing.
All right, let's listen back in to Jay Grover. Now, this man, again, is a person who worked with Diane McIver, and he had a close relationship with both her and her husband, Tex, the defendant in this case. Let's listen in.
Shows really kind of the other part of the, so this would be the same pit group that you were just looking at. This is taken probably from about the doorway of the guest bedroom, looking back into that part of the condominium.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors what is this right here?
It's a wine cooler.
Wine cooler?
Yes.
Did it go like almost from the floor to the ceiling?
Yes.
And what are these things here?
Those are wine racks. So the cooler, the wine racks, that's also cooler right there, and a bar sink.
Okay. Did you know the defendant to drink wine? Did you know the defendant to drink wine?
Absolutely.
Why do you say absolutely?
I don't think that there was ever a time, that I was around them in a social situation that they didn't, that there wasn't wine being consumed.
Okay. And can you tell the jury what type of wine have you seen the defendant drink before?
Well, they drink reds and whites. And when I say they, I'm really speaking of Tex, Diane, and Mr. Corey, kind of grouping them together. They used to drink a lot of white, and someone told Mr. Corey that the white wine has more sugar in it and more calories, and so it kind of switched to red, Pinot Noir, and that seemed to be the favorite.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, over the many years that you socialized with Diane McIver and her husband, on how many occasions would you say you've seen him drink red wine?
Again, everybody, you're watching a live feed into the Claude Tex McIver case. Jay Grover, a man that worked with the victim, Diane McIver, is on the stand. He's talking about his interactions with the defendant right after this shooting. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Law&Crime, everybody. Let's go live into the Claude Tex McIver courtroom out of Atlanta.
In the entertainment part of the condominium.
Okay. And do you have any idea how many bottles of wine that they had in their wine rack? Any idea at all?
Just there, or just in the condominium, or?
Oh, yeah, just in the condominium.
Several hundred. I mean, several hundred bottles of wine.
Okay.
They were quite the connoisseurs of fine wines.
And can you tell the jurors, why did you kind of catch me and say, am I just talking about how many bottles of wine there in the condo? Did you know them to have wine at other places?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this was the small collection of wine here. At the ranch in Eatonton, there's a fabulous wine cellar, beautiful there, that had many bottles of wine.
There's a photograph of State's Exhibit number 41 on the screen. You recognize that?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
That's a photo of a part of the wine cellar at the ranch in Eatonton.
I got a question for you. I can't get anybody to answer this for me. Can you tell the jurors, what do you call a bottle of wine that is that big? Do you know?
I don't know the official name, but no, sir, I don't.
No.
But I think that. Well, I don't want to guess. I believe I recognize that bottle though from an event, but
But you don't know?
No, sir.
Okay. I still don't get the question answered. Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, when you arrived at the condo that Tuesday evening with Mr. Corey, what was the mood like in the condo?
It was I won't say it was cheerful, but it certainly wasn't it wasn't like people weren't in mourning. They had sent out and bought dinner, and people were eating and just talking and laughing, and I mean it wasn't somber. I won't say that it was, over the top. It wasn't a party, but it certainly wasn't somber or anything like that.
Okay. And so, can you tell the jurors, did you remain in the condo or did you leave?
No, I did remain in the condo. It just seemed so.
I'm sorry. Can I object? I think you answered the question, and anything else he's going to say would be non-responsive and not relevant.
Okay. Why didn't you stay in the condo?
Same objection.
I thought the objection was non-responsive.
But also, so now relevance.
What's the relevance of why he didn't stay?
Well, it goes to explain his actions because he left the condo and went somewhere, and then, without speaking from the jury.
Sure, so why don't you just figure out, ask him where he went? And
Okay.
If there's,
okay,
I'll be able to better process the concern when we see where you're going.
Okay. So after seeing the mood in the condominium, did you leave?
I did.
Where'd you go?
I left the actual condominium and I went down into to the parking deck to level P3. That's the designation of the particular part of the parking deck for the condo building.
Okay. And when you got down to level P3, did you see anyone?
Yes, and that's why I went down there because Austin Swall and Jim Hickey, another friend, had gone downstairs. Austin wanted to throw the football. Jim formerly played at the University of Georgia, and he's a big guy and he's a football player, and went downstairs to throw the football with Austin, and I wanted to get out of the condo, so I went down there and joined them.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors why you were down there with Mr. Hickey and Austin? Did you see the defendant?
Yes, I did. I did not know that Tex was down there, but when I walked out into the parking deck there, then Tex was down there also talking on his cell phone.
Okay. And this is, do you know about what time in the evening on Tuesday this is?
Trying to put in context, it was within probably a half an hour or 45 minutes or so from the time that we arrived. So if that was at 6 or 7, this is approximately 45 minutes, 30 minutes or so after that.
Okay. Let me show you just a couple of photos. This is State's Exhibit number 83. And you recognize State's Exhibit 83? Or what's depicted in it?
Yeah, well, this is the motor court of the condominium building. So this would be like a ramp that comes down off of Kingsborough, where you would enter and you would go to your right and down through an electric gate into the actual parking deck itself, or you would turn to the left here and yes, to the left when you could pull in. There's a couple visitors parking spaces, and then you exit back out this ramp. Well, that's the walkway, but there's another ramp that's right in this general area that would.
Okay.
It kind of a half circle.
Okay. And the level P3, it's you would go down the ramp and it's below what we see here on this picture.
That's correct. You would go down, when you entered to go under the building, then you would come down the ramp into this general area here, and you would continue down right through there. And there's an electric gate that's controlled by a remote, only for the people that live there, and then that was the P3 level.
Okay. So can you tell the jurors, while you were down on that level and you saw Mr. Hickey and Austin and the defendant on his phone, did the defendant say anything to you at that time? Did y'all have a conversation?
Yeah, we kind of we were tossing the football while he was on the phone, and then he apparently finished his call, and he and I kind of gravitated toward one another, and right there while Austin and Jim continued to throw the football, and Tex and I had a conversation.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, what did he say to you at that time?
He asked me if I knew anything about Social Security and Social Security checks.
And is that all he said to you?
Well, he asked the question, and I kind of made a joke, and I said, well, I know I'm not old enough to collect Social Security yet, and he said, well, I was just wondering about Diane's Social Security, and he went on to say, I was just wondering if I could collect her checks now. And I told him I didn't have any idea. I could find out, but I had no idea whether he could. In fact, I think I went on to say, I guess you can, but I don't know. And he said, well, he would find out himself.
Who is Les Ball?
That's Les is Janie Calhoun's husband, Janie Calhoun Ball. It's Janie's husband.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, sometime around this encounter with the defendant on the P3 level of the parking garage, when he asked you about collecting Diane McIver's Social Security checks, did you see Les Ball?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors what happened when you saw Mr. Ball?
Well, just as Tex and I were standing there, and Jim and Austin were continuing to throw the football, then Les came down and came out into the parking deck also.
Okay. And speaking of Mr. Ball, do you know whether or not he is suffering from a medical crisis right now?
Yes, I do, and he is indeed.
Did you see any interactions between the defendant and Les Ball at that time?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, did they actually have a conversation?
They did.
And were you close enough such that you could overhear the conversation?
I was.
And can you tell the jurors, don't tell us what Mr. Ball said, but can you tell the jury what the defendant said?
Yes, sir.
Please do so.
He asked Les if he knew anyone in Oklahoma. And then he made the statement that he was trying to get on the board of directors of a tobacco company in Oklahoma and it paid $100,000 a year just to be on the board of directors. And if I can add, it was Liberty Tobacco Company was the actual name.
You remember the name of the tobacco company?
Yes, sir, I do.
And this conversation was on Tuesday, September 27th in the evening?
Yes, sir, it was.
Now, I want to fast forward a couple of days, and I want to ask you, on or about Thursday or Friday of that same week, did you have a telephone conversation with the defendant regarding the Ford Expedition?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors, do you remember what day it was you had that conversation?
I think there were probably there were several conversations about the expedition.
Just the first one. We'll start with the first one. If you remember.
I don't remember the exact day or date, and again, we actually had a couple of conversations. There was one on there was one in particular on Friday.
That same week?
Yeah, if I refresh my memory as far as the actual date.
Okay. In connection with your testimony here today, were you interviewed by my office, by me?
Yes, sir.
And were there notes that kind of summarize the content of the interview that we had with you?
Yes, sir.
You've had a chance prior to today to review the notes?
I have.
And in fact, have you made corrections to the notes?
I made some corrections and some additions to the notes.
Okay. Do you think if I allowed you to see a copy of those notes, that might help to refresh your recollection about what day you would have had the phone call conversation with the defendant later on that week?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just read it silently to yourself, and you let me know when you get finished.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, having had the opportunity to review.
All right, quick question before we hear the conversation that he had with Tex. Again, Yosha, this idea that he's trying to get money, Tex McIver's trying to get money. Actually, you know what? We should probably listen in. And Yosha, stand by. We'll talk about this after the break. Let's listen in live to Jay Grover.
The phone conversation, it was actually with the defendant?
Yes, sir, it was.
Can you tell the jury, what did he say?
We had a conversation about a friend of mine purchasing the SUV, the Expedition, the Ford Expedition.
The one that was involved in this incident?
Yes, sir.
And during that conversation, did you learn whether or not the defendant actually had regained custody of the SUV at that time from the police?
Yes, sir.
What did he tell you?
That he had the SUV and that it was
Okay, so this testimony is pretty interesting today, hearing about what Tex McIver told Jay Grover. It's trying to show that he was wrapping things up after Diane's death, trying to get some money, and now trying to sell the same car where the killing happened. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. Some suspicious behavior on the part of the defendant, Tex McIver, being elaborated by this witness, what was being said. You're not going to want to miss anything. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and we're going straight back into the courtroom. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We're covering the Claude Tex McIver case. Before we jump back into the courtroom, quick question for my guest, who's unfortunately going to be leaving this morning, criminal defense attorney Yosha Gunasekera. Yosha, we're listening to the testimony of Jay Grover, a man that worked with the victim, a man that knew Tex, and now he's recounting the conversations that he had with Tex McIver, and it seems very suspicious, the things that Tex is saying. What do you make of it?
Well, it's all about spin. Obviously, Jay feels like there was something suspicious going on, and I think that's the tone of the testimony. But you could also argue that that Tex is just being stupid, that he's just being candid.
Is it also being stupid? Or let's think about the fact, if Diane was the breadwinner in this family and she was bringing in all the money and she dies, is he so wrong to think about, oh, can I get her Social Security money? Oh, do you know anybody in Oklahoma? Maybe I could sit on the board for $100,000 a year. Isn't that a way to look at it?
It definitely is, and that's likely how the defense is going to spin it, because she was the breadwinner and he is worried about money. And one of the things that you don't think about when a loved one dies is the financial situation. I mean, there's still someone who is living and has to go on, and it's the uncomfortable topics to discuss.
Then again, he might be thinking about this a little bit too soon after the shooting. Yosha, I don't know if we're going to have a time to bring you back on, but in the meantime, it was great having you back here.
It's great to be here.
All right, let's listen back into Jay Grover.